I'm Twyla from My Bilingual Life. Today I wanted to talk to you about the parts of learning a language. So many people come up to me and say, I want to learn Spanish or I want to learn English. And that's a wonderful goal. But there's a lot involved with learning a language. So I wanted to talk to you today about the different parts of language. In general, there's 6 parts of language: vocabulary, grammar, reading, writing, conversation, and culture. So let's talk a little bit about this. First of all is vocabulary. Vocabulary are the words. So when you start learning a language, the first thing that you're going to learn are some vocabulary words, the different words for different things. And in all honesty, there's not really an easy way to do this other than memorization. There's lots of tools that you can use. There's some great apps that help with that. Duolingo is a wonderful app to help you learn some vocabulary. Flashcards are really good. I have a lot of different kinds of flashcards available on my TPT store. If you'd like more information, I can let you know about that. You can make your own flashcards. I made a notebook for myself. But the point being is you're going to have to learn a lot of words. And in the beginning, they're not really going to make sense. You're just going to have to memorize them. Also, different jobs or different hobbies have different jargon. And jargon is the word specific to that hobby or that job. For example, when I was breeding horses, there were a lot of words that I used specifically when working with the horses that I might not use in other places. And I'll be honest, I'm not very familiar with a lot of the jargon used in sports. I'm not very familiar with a lot of different sports. I know some of the words, but there's a lot of specific words that I just don't know. Another tool that you can use to learn these words is Google. One of my best friends is Google Translate. If there's a word that I don't know, especially maybe like in a sport that I'm not familiar with, you can usually look it up and find a good translation. The next part of language is grammar. Grammar is how you put the sentences together. It's how you use those words to make a sentence. And it's also the patterns of language. For example, this is when you get into the conjugation of verbs and using the correct pronouns and the direct and indirect objects. All those grammar things that when you're learning a language naturally, you learn the patterns. And you're going to have to learn that in another language. Now, the good thing is you already speak a language, so you can use that language to help you identify the patterns. And sometimes it's a good thing to notice what is a different pattern than your native language. For example, in English, the works for almost everything. In Spanish, you have el or la, los or las. So that's quite different. So when you notice that something's different in a language, that means that maybe you need to spend a little bit more time focusing on it. Okay. I'm going to put reading and writing together in this case because reading and writing in another language is very similar to reading and writing in your native language. You can have a perfectly good conversation and not know how to read or write. Reading and writing has to do with the phonemes, knowing what sounds letters make, and putting those together to make words. Maybe that is not your goal. Maybe you don't need to be able to read a language. Maybe you just need to be able to have a conversation. You choose your own goals. However, I do suggest that you learn some reading and writing. I will say, especially if you're going to learn Spanish, reading in Spanish is very easy because the vowels always have the same sound. It's much easier to learn to read in Spanish than it is in English. So if you're already reading English, Spanish will be very easy for you. I personally do better when I can see a word written. I can remember it better. So reading and writing can also be a good tool for you to memorize these new words that you're learning. Another part of the language is conversation. Conversation is both listening and speaking. Usually, when you learn a language, you can understand it a lot better than you can speak to start out with. And if you notice, that's how a baby learns. At first, the baby is listening, and they might respond with a very simple answer. That's kind of how it works when you're learning a new language. You may understand the question, but you may not be able to elaborate on your answer. You might be able to only get out sí or no. So just think of it as the natural progression. It's very normal for you to understand, but not be able to speak. I know when I was learning Italian, I can understand quite a bit of Italian, but I still cannot quite get my thoughts out the way I'd like to. I still sound like a child when I'm speaking Italian. My vocabulary is not very big. You'll also see that same progression in reading and writing. You can usually read before you can learn to write. The input is usually quicker than the output. So don't get frustrated if you feel like you can't speak or you can't write your new language very well yet. It'll come. Keep practicing. The last part of language that I want to talk about is the culture. You cannot learn a language and completely ignore where the language is coming from. Granted, here in the United States, there are people of many cultures that live here in the United States, so they kind of share the culture. But realize that Spanish actually comes from other places, other countries that maybe have different traditions or beliefs or ways of life than we do. Another thing that you need to take into note about culture is that one thing may be called different things in different places. For example, guagua, carro, coche, auto, all mean the same thing. Pretty much it depends on where you're living or what audience you're speaking with to know which one to use. So there's different ways of saying car in Spanish. Spanish is spoken in many places around the world. So you need to learn a little bit about the culture so that you can express yourself better. So the next time that you find yourself saying, I want to learn Spanish, which is a wonderful goal, by the way, think a little bit more about what it is specifically that you want to learn. Do you need to learn some vocabulary? Are you just getting started? Are you ready to start putting it together and learn some grammar? Do you really want to be able to talk to someone and learn some conversation? Do you love to read and want to be able to do that in another language? Think a little bit more specifically about what your goal is. And just pay attention and focus. By breaking it down, the different parts of the language, it'll help you be able to focus on one specific area. And as you gain proficiency in that area, you can expand to the others. I hope that helps a little bit. I'll see you again soon. Adios. Nos vemos.